and welcome to another episode of Unique Professions. My name is Dan Honey, and we are going to talk about somatic therapy and mental health yoga. It is an absolute pleasure to have Liz McComish. How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you for having me on.
No worries. Now, first off, the obvious question is, what is somatic therapy?
It's such a good question. And I think at the moment, there are a lot of things that come underneath somatic therapy. There's a lot of different definitions of it. For me, the way that I work with it, so I call it somatic psychotherapy. So I have a background in both mental health, but also body work. And I work with people's mind and their body and their emotions and their nervous system to untangle imprints that they have had that create ongoing suffering in their lives.
I do understand somatic therapy has a lot to do with trauma.
Yes, definitely, because our traumas leave imprints in us. And trauma is, it's a massive spectrum. We can have a trauma that sort of feels quite small, and we can have traumas that are absolutely massive. But the definition of trauma is that it remains unresolved. And when it's unresolved, our nervous system is still operating, thinking that it's still within us, it's still happening in our current reality. And then we have emotions and thoughts and beliefs that all structure themselves around that response from the nervous system that something is still going on in our lives right now. So say, for example, if I was at school in primary school and I was bullied and that was never effectively resolved. So to resolve it would be to work with someone who can help me to release the emotions around it and to reclaim my power around it, because being bullied is very disempowering. If it was never resolved, I could take that into my adult life so that as an adult, my nervous system would be continually thinking that people were likely to bully me, and I would get very fearful in situations, and I would probably lack a lot of sense of my own power and my own worth. And it would continue to play out in my current reality until I worked with someone to actually undo the original trauma. And the thing about, as you know, because you're a mental health worker, right? So you understand that there's, we can work with our thoughts around something, but when we're working with our thoughts around something that's actually imprinted in our nervous system, we're only reorganizing the way we think about something that's already imprinted in our nervous system. So what we're doing with the somatic work is we're going in and we're working with that imprint in the nervous system to release it and to rewire the relationship between the nervous system, the emotions, the thoughts, the belief system, so that it's not running the present moment anymore.
And you said there about childhood trauma. Do you find that with a lot of your clients you work with, that's the starting point?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, look, there's people who have childhood trauma will often come to me and present with things that are going on in their life right now that they're very unhappy about. Number one, it can be relationships, because mostly trauma is relational, but it can be other things as well, fears of flying or other anxieties that they have that is connected to stuff that happened in their childhood. So once again, it's playing out the present moment because they have this imprint in their system and their entire being has been rewired to see that as part of their reality. So that's how trauma works. Our entire system becomes rewired, and every moment in our present moment is being influenced by the experience that we had in the past.
How do you unpack that rewiring, as you call it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's so unique depending on who it is. So there's always a discovery process of working with the client to work out, like, where is this coming from in you? Like, what is actually happening with you that is, creating this situation right now, or that is reacting to this situation the way that it's creating so much suffering in you. And do you know what, David? The really interesting thing is that even though things can happen in our childhood, we don't actually need to always dig back there and find that moment in time, because we can work with what's happening in the present moment. So sometimes I've had clients that come to me that say, I don't want to talk about my traumas. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I understand that. We don't need to. We can work with what's happening in their life right now. So the way that might be unpacked, for example, is that if I have a client that comes to me and they're struggling in their relationships, not necessarily their intimate relationships, but in a whole raft of relationships, they've got a lot of struggle that's going on. And so we can work with the present moment relationships and start to work with their nervous system, their emotions, their beliefs, their thoughts around what's happening in the present moment. And working on that will help to undo what has happened in the past. Some people come to me and they come with the past and say, I know this happened to me and this continues to affect everything. Like I have this ongoing fear, for example, of the dark, or I have an ongoing fear of, let's say someone came to me and said I was bullied a lot when I was younger, and I now have a lot of social anxiety. So we can then work with both, you see, to start to unpack that. Some people, it's really very much through what they're feeling in their body and their emotions that they want to work from that layer, and that's fine as well. Some people have thoughts that are continuously tripping them up, thoughts about who they are in the world, that they're not good enough, or they're not worthy, or they might be continually thinking about someone or something in their past that doesn't serve them anymore. So we can work through that. We can start at that starting point. So I guess the way that we go in is it's whatever someone comes in with, we work with that. And then we start to go from there and work out, well, that particular thing that's going on for them, how is their nervous system reading that? How emotionally, what's happening for them around that? What are their thoughts saying around that? What's their entire belief system around this particular thing that's going on? Now let's start to unpack all of that and start to rewire it. Because when you have a situation where everything is playing into it in that way, you're going to get a nervous system reaction to it. You're going to get an emotional reaction to it. You're going to have a whole lot of thoughts that come up from it and a belief about yourself around that situation as well. So I'll give you an example of that. Some people have a great fear of their own anger. So they've been taught over time that anger is not something they're allowed to express, or they have had their own experiences of feeling very overwhelmed when they feel angry. So the nervous system then starts to read that anger is something that's not safe. Now, anger is a primary emotion. You all have it. You all have it. Universally. Yeah. Primary emotion means universally every single person experiences anger. There's nothing wrong with it. And in fact, it's a very adaptational response to the world.
And expressing it is okay.
Yeah. And so you and I both know, right? There's healthy, assertive expression of it. And then there's an expression of it which can border on, violence, whether it's physical, whether it's verbal violence or violence towards yourself, because we can also turn our anger on ourselves. So considering that anger is actually a universal emotion and it's primary and we all have it, there's nothing wrong with it, how does that happen? It's because our nervous system has got an imprint around what anger is. And so whenever we experience anger, our nervous system goes into either fight, flight, freeze, or shut down around our own experience of anger. Now, why that's set up could be a number of different reasons, right? So someone might come into me because they're like, I'm having problems with my anger. It's like, okay, right. So your nervous system is actually getting dysregulated when you're experiencing anger, okay? So perhaps that person got really shut down around their anger when they were younger. They were told that anger wasn't okay. You think of, I like using this example, like you think of two toddlers together and toddler A's got a toy and toddler B doesn't. Toddler B takes the toy, toddler A smashes toddler B over the head, right? Because toddler A feels angry. That's what they do.
Yeah.
All right? So there's two things that are going on. One, that toddler A is having the emotion of anger come up. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Reasonable. I'd be angry too if someone just got and took one of my things.
My stuff.
Yeah. But the behavior is the toddler hits the other one on the head. So there's the behavior and there's the emotion. What happens is the two often get tangled together and the child is told they're bad. And the child will look at the anger as being something that's bad. But actually, what we need to do as a society is start to teach children and people, well, actually, anger's not bad. It's how you express it. So let's find healthy expressions of anger. So saying that it's a very simple scenario, but that can be a way that someone starts to go, my anger's bad. So their nervous system gets scared of it, right? Because we always want to be accepted by our parents, and socially we need to be accepted. Otherwise our nervous system thinks we're going to be left with the wolves, we're going to get eaten. So we will shut ourselves down in order to be accepted by the people around us. So we can start to look at anger. If I experience anger, then I might get abandoned. So anger is not a safe emotion. The other way, so then we can build a whole lot of beliefs around what anger is, and that anger is not good. It's a pretty bad thing. The other way that it can happen is that we've experienced so much anger in our lives, like maybe growing up in very violent households. So anger always seemed really dangerous to us. So that's another way that our nervous system can go, anger is so bad. Anger leads to really bad things. And I can imagine, the field that you work, you can think of lots of other ways where anger gets completely goes completely blown out and goes into spaces that it's not. And we can feel so angry at ourselves, and really shame ourselves for things. And we can end up, reaching for alcohol and drugs or hurting ourselves in different ways. That's when we turn anger in on ourselves. So, yeah, there's so many different ways in which it can go awry, you see.
How do you regulate that then with the nervous system?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just use anger again as an example. Let's say I'm really angry about something, and I want to, punch someone, punch a wall, but then I have that self-control where I just sit down and start swear a couple of times, and that's the end of it. So how does that kind of regulation work?
Is that the end of it or not?
Well,
Or is that how shut it down?
Shut it down, guy. But you don't. But the action is you're not actually hurting anyone. You're not actually hurting yourself. It's just that self. So how does that come to play?
Yeah. So we're getting to the real finer aspects of how to work with your nervous system, and it's. You really, you need to do this with someone who really knows what they're doing. But basically, well, in the first instance anyway, after time, you can end up doing a lot of it yourself. But in the beginning, you need to be with someone who really knows what they're doing on the nervous system. So a somatic psychotherapist or someone who really understands the nervous system is going to safely take you into a little bit of that anger and the dysregulation that comes with it, and then help you to then let your nervous system know that it's actually safe to experience little bits of anger. So you got to do it in a very small way at first. So you can experience a little bit, and then you untangle the nervous system response from that, so that the nervous system goes, oh, that was actually safe. I just experienced a bit of anger and nothing bad happened, and I was able to come back into a regulated state.
Yep.
So you can imagine how that's very simple what I just said, but how many different ways that can actually play out in a session that I might have with a person. So the key is, like I said, it's unlinking that, because the nervous system is going, anger is dangerous. We want to unlink that to begin with. And then we want the system to start to be able to learn to tolerate small bits of anger, right? It's like with developing frustration resilience, right? If children can start to manage small amounts of frustration over time, they build a tolerance for it. And they're like, oh, I can handle life's frustrations that come to me. So it's the same with unlinking the nervous system from the anger in that way, is that we want to be able to start to tolerate anger so that we can then make a choice as to how we express it, because expressing it is really important. Because it's an energy, right? Emotions are energy in motion. So we want to learn how to be able to safely express our anger when we're feeling angry.
Do you think over time, as the decades and the years have progressed, expressing emotions, whether it be angry, sadness, or those emotions, we're taught as children to kind of suppress them?
100%, yeah.
I can remember back in the day when I was a young child, if me and another kid were playing in the background, and like you said, he took my toy, I hit him, but it would have been dealt with then, that's it, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And so over time, I think children have been kind of, because everything we learn from as adults is all starts from the childbirth.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that's, societal expectations.
Yeah, totally. And it's so illogical, right? Because like you think about like when you're born, when you're a baby, you don't have your thoughts. You are an emotional being and your emotions drive you to get your needs met. That's what they do. They are energy in motion. And there is a specific way that emotions travel in our body, right? So they actually are created by a relationship between our organs and sensations and our vagus nerve. And those sensations, those feelings, those emotions will actually travel up our vagus nerve. So if you imagine your brain is your operating system, and so your body is like if you've got a keyboard and you've got your computer, or your laptop or whatever, you've got the operating system inside, but you're giving it the messages via the keyboard, right? So you're telling it what's going on. That's what our emotions are doing in our body. Our body is literally feeding all these messages to the operating system. Then society teaches us to shut those down. We actually can't shut them down. So do you know the only way that we can try and stop them from coming out? We brace our body. So our diaphragm will just go and shut down like that. Our rib cage, our muscles, the thoracic inlet, which is at the top of your shoulders, your throat, your neck will clench up like this. So we literally try and stop the emotions from coming up because society tells us we're not allowed to feel things. Yet it also tells us to be happy all the time. But joy comes from the same place as the other emotions.
Yes.
So it's kind of confusing, right? So we're getting told to shut down all the so-called feelings that are apparently not okay, yet feel joy, but we can't shut down the ones that feel challenging and not shut down joy as well. So people are shutting everything down at once and their bodies are getting so rigid and having to hold so much inflammation so they can shut down all these emotions. Why are we taught to shut our emotions down, David? Why are we taught that? I think it must come from back in Descartes' time, right? I think, therefore I am. Where did it come from? I don't know where it came from.
No.
Because it still blows my mind. It's like the feeling aspect of life is the most amazing aspect. And when you really think back on memories that really meant something to you, there'll be a feeling associated with it, whether it was a feeling of joy because of something that you accomplished, or maybe it was a feeling of grief over deep loss. Maybe it was a feeling of anger over something. It's of fear of something. That they're where the biggest memories are. And also, we are going to experience emotions. The other thing, everyone always wants to just be love and light.
Yeah.
That's great. But if you're going to experience love, you're going to experience grief too.
Pain, yeah.
Because they are the opposite sides of the same coin. If you love someone or something, at some stage you're gonna lose that person in some way. Whether they leave this earth before you do or you leave before they do. There will be grief associated with that. So why are we not taught how to work with our emotions to allow them to release from our body? I mean, grief and sadness are, they're profoundly beautiful emotions. They are completely overwhelming when something really big happens in our lives. But if you think about someone passing away in your life, right, or an animal, someone or a pet for which you have a lot of love, or even, maybe you've lost a part of your life through trauma or something, so that you'll have sadness and grief around that too. When we don't process the emotion around that, part of us stays stuck in time. So let's say it's a person who's passed away. So if you try and push that emotion away and try and just get on with things and not actually grieve that person, then part of you stays stuck in time, right? And that is a trauma. That's a really big, massive trauma. When you are able to start to work with the grief and the loss and the sadness around that person, how long that will take is, it's who knows. It's so personal and so unique to each person. But in the grieving, you actually are able to, over time, move to a place where that person has a different relationship with you, because they're not here anymore, right? When they have a different relationship with you, you can engage them on that level. Does that make sense? That's like even more of a, like, it's they're not in physical form anymore, but the processing, the grief and the loss around the loss of them in physical form eventually takes you to a place where you have a relationship with them that is different and can be really, really beautiful. So it really serves our emotions. Also, they serve us. Every single emotion is there for us. Grief and sadness and loss is an area that I feel very deeply about, because like people who have been through a really big loss, they really get this, that it can be very hard because you're carrying that with you everywhere and people don't know what to do with that. So it can feel very isolating and very, very lonely. Yet imagine if we all, like as a society, started to learn how to work with grief and with loss so that we could all hold space for each other when people are going through these really monumental things they go through in their life. I think we'd be such a peaceful earth.
Yeah, that brings me to an interesting point. I was wondering, if we roll back for you, how did you find your space in the Somatic Therapist? How did you become?
Yeah. I had very big childhood trauma, and that's played out in my life for a very, very long time. I was suicidal from a very young age. I was taking overdoses. I had a lot of drug and alcohol use as a teenager. I had an eating disorder. I had like everything, that comes from having serious childhood abuse. And it wasn't in my family or anything. It was institutional abuse, sexual abuse from an institution. And so anyone who's experienced that knows exactly what I'm talking about, the way that it messes with you. And so I have that experience of learning that, when you have a deep trauma like that and it imprints itself in your system, you start to create your entire life from that trauma. And it's a case of like, your belief system around who you are, you're carrying that pain with you, the anger with you, the grief, you're carrying all of that with you. And then the drugs and alcohol and so on are all the way that you self-medicate. And then the eating disorder was me turning my anger in on myself, trying to control an environment that felt very uncontrollable for me, because my emotions were so out of control, right? Because of the abuse. So because of all that, I tried so many different ways, and I actually worked with some brilliant therapists who started me on this road, psychotherapists. And then I got to a point where I was coping, I was alive and I was coping. But then I had my first child and it was a very difficult birth. And that's not surprising, because when you've had sexual abuse that hasn't been worked through, that part of your body is a part of the body that really holds that memory. And so for me to have my first child required so much surrender in me that my body went into the re-traumatized state. And I had postnatal depression afterwards. And it was when I had postnatal depression that, I had this little baby, and I was like, I feel so emotional talking about it. I had this little baby, and, he was my everything, right? And so for me, I was like, I've got to do something. Like, what am I going to do, right? Like, I don't want this relationship with my baby. I don't want to imprint my baby with what's going on for me. And I tried a lot of different things, but I found it was yoga. There was the one thing that gave me respite and made me I felt better after I'd done yoga. And I thought, this is really interesting. And something's happening here. It was the first time that I'd worked with my own body. And this is going back 17 years ago, right? I went, if I work with my body, it feels better. I feel better. And so I started studying yoga. I became a yoga teacher. I was in studying yoga, but I delved very deeply into the neuroscience around yoga, what is happening for us in our body, and I got into trauma and yoga and how that works with our body, and how our body really keeps the score of everything that's happened in our lives until it's properly worked with it. Even then, it keeps the score, but it alchemizes into a wisdom and a compassion and love and openness rather than a bracing, right? So, and I just had this absolute love for it that I can't, it's just became my passion. I knew this was my life's work. And then I started doing a lot of very intensive therapy myself with someone who's a somatic psychotherapist. And I found in that, I was like, it actually started to change my reality. So the more work that I did on working with my nervous system, working with my emotions, working with that, that would start to reprogram my belief system, which started to reprogram my reality. So if you're thinking and this is not new age stuff, but sometimes people say to me like, it's all woohoo. It's not. It's all science based, right? And we can go all the way back to Jung, like Carl Jung, who was who worked with Sigmund Freud, right? If you look up Jungian psychology, he was saying this a very, very long time ago, that we create our reality based on our belief system, which comes from what's been imprinted inside us. So as I finished doing this somatic psychotherapy, I was like, oh my God, I'm actually changing my reality. I'd be in situations where I'd normally get super triggered, and I'd be like, I'm not getting triggered anymore, like 100% not getting triggered anymore. And I feel differently about this person. I feel differently about this situation. I feel differently about myself. Suddenly, I no longer wanted to drink anymore. I just didn't want to drink anymore. Like, whereas I used to drink every night, I didn't do any work around substances. Like, I didn't go and do any kind of programs around it. I suddenly did not have the desire to do it anymore. And I will occasionally have a drink now, but I do not need to go home and have a drink anymore. That's the power of working with ourselves somatically. Because if you come back to what I was talking about how our emotions feed from our body up to the operating system, up to the brain, right? We are literally so when we have traumas that are imprinted within us and our nervous system is imprinted in certain ways, that is continuously feeding up all this stuff, right? From our inner world. It's this discombobulated kind of reality inside us that's continually feeding to our brain and our belief system, like this is what's going on for us. Then through our perception, we perceive the world through those lenses, right? So once we start to go back in and undo what's happening for us, the emotions we've suppressed, the nervous system activity, we're undoing all the bracing in our body that's been holding everything down for so long, and our belief system starts to change, we see the world through a different lens and our lives start to change. So because I had that experience of it, David, of how deeply it worked for me, that is why I was like, this is what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing.
And obviously you mentioned there yoga. How did you find that with the lead of a somatic therapist? How did you find both of those work for you?
Yeah, they work brilliantly together in a few different ways. So one of the ways is that I had a lot of knowledge of the body first. Through yoga, I learned, anatomy. I learned all about the Eastern tradition around it, and meditation and mindfulness. So I learned all of that, and all of that knowledge actually helps me when I'm working with clients, because I have a lot of skills where I can help people to regulate very quickly, and I can bring them back into a sense of calm very fast. So if they start getting dysregulated, I know I have a huge toolbox that I can use to help them. And I also teach my clients all these tools. I also have an online space that I've created where I teach what I call somatic movement. So my somatic movement is it's based in the foundation of yoga movements, but I bring in all my knowledge about nervous system, emotions, mindfulness, and working with our own body to teach people how to start to regulate and how to move their bodies to release emotions that have been held onto for a long time, bracing we have in our body, but to do it in a way that's so safe, and I help them to regulate their nervous system at the same time. So I also, use it there. And I really love that because people find a lot of my clients, but also there are a lot of people who come into my online space uniquely. They're not clients of mine, they've come in uniquely, and they find that they can do that practice and it actually helps them to find a sense of peace, calm, mindfulness, to start to understand their emotions, to understand how to regulate their nervous system, which then obviously regulates their emotions, and how to work with their own emotions as well.
And you were saying earlier, the trauma, there's obviously a lot of triggers, where it'll be a different part of their life. How do you regulate them with the nervous system? Triggers.
Around triggers.
Yeah.
Okay, so I always talk about triggers on a spectrum of, say, or a scale of, say, 0 to 10, right? So you can do a lot of the work yourself with your triggers, but only on, say, if 0 is like, doesn't really affect me, but it's kind of annoying. And 10, is like, that's massive trauma connected to parts of my life that have been absolutely huge. So say 10 for me would be the sexual abuse that I suffered at the hands of an institution when I was a child. And 0 might be, when someone's driving in front of me and they're going 40 in a 60 zone, right? So see how there's such a scale and triggers that we have?
Yep.
So through my online space, I can teach people how to work with their own triggers. And I say from about 0 to maybe 6, 5 or 6. Anything beyond them, you need to go and work with a professional who understands nervous system regulation, because our nervous systems are constantly communicating with each other. So when we first sat down, I've never actually met you before, our nervous systems were sussing each other out below conscious awareness through a process called neuroception. That's why some people you just instantly feel comfortable with, and others you just go, I don't know, right? So that's the process of neuroception where that's actually happening. Because I had done so much of my own work and my own nervous system work, my nervous system is pretty, people feel pretty safe around my nervous system, right? And with anyone who's working in this area, as long as they have done an appropriate amount of work, their clients are going to feel their nervous system's going to hold that space for them, right? So when you're working with the harder end of triggers, you actually need another nervous system there that's holding the space for your nervous system. And also someone who can bring you back really fast when you're going into working with your trigger. At the lower end of the scale, you can usually do it yourself. But once again, working with triggers is about really identifying what the trigger is. So let's say for me, when someone's going 40 in the 60 zone, I'm a lucky psycho on the road, but sometimes it annoys me. And I talk myself through it, right? So in that situation, here's how I'd work with that trigger. I'd be like, okay, first of all, with my brain, I would be like, am I safe? I'm actually safe right now, right? If I was on there, I'd be like, yes, I'm safe. I'm not being hunted by a lion. So we tell our brain that first. Yes, I'm safe. Okay, cool. I know that I'm safe. What am I feeling in my body around this? Where do I feel this in my body? So with the road rage, I might be like, I feel it in my solar plexus, which is, your upper tummy. I feel it in my upper tummy, just underneath my rib cage. Then I would be like, what does it feel like? Okay, it feels like there's someone going, clenching, their hand in there and clenching it. And I would, at the same time as being aware of that, I would then regulate my nervous system. So whatever works for people, there are so many different ways that you can work regulation. I would do something like, one of my favorite ones is, I imagine, if I'm sitting in my car, I'd be like, where do I feel most supported when I'm sitting here in my car? I go, what parts of my body? I'd be like, okay, my body feels really supported, underneath my upper legs and in my upper back. So I'm really supported and really safe. I'm going to imagine I'm breathing into those parts of my body and breathing out of them and becoming heavy, feeling more supported in my seat right now. So I know, so I'm telling my nervous system, I'm actually safe and I'm supported. And then I would work on being in connection with that trigger, just simply breathing into it and breathing out of it. And at a level like that, a layer like that, that trigger, that intensity in my body would likely slowly fade away and go. Okay. So that's one way of working with the trigger. But everyone is so unique that sometimes in a situation like that, the feeling in my body might increase in intensity, right? And then it's about how you actually work with that as well. So when I'm working with clients, everyone's so unique that I'm tracking everyone all the time to go, okay, what's happening with that sensation now? Where's it going? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Is it changing shape? Where's it going to? In a session, sometimes that sensation will turn into someone's body wanting to move in a certain way. And it might be a tiny thing. It might be that they want to push their hand away like that, which is very much a boundary that someone wants to set. And that sensation could be connected to a boundary that they weren't able to set at some stage in their life. Their body wants to express it that way. It could be a little bit of shaking. It could be their feet start moving in like a fight-flight response. It could be that they want to, their throat wants to get something out. So it's so different for every person, David. It's like, I feel like I can't give you one answer.
Yeah.
Questions answered. Yeah, I've tried to, but as I started to answer, I was like, I'm actually like digging a hole that then it is not really going anywhere because everyone's not going to answer.
Yeah. That's why, everyone has an individual response, and each response is different. Yeah, so it's not like a machine or anything like that.
No, it's not.
So, I wonder why that is.
Yeah, because we're also unique. And so we bring all of our unique, our own things into every reaction that we have. We're not just, we're not just robots. We're not just ourselves either. We've also got like influences from, sort of 3 generations before us that can be playing into it. We can be triggered right now. We can have triggers right now that we don't actually have any connection to in our own life. It's come from a couple of generations ago.
I was going to ask about intergenerational trauma.
Intergenerational trauma. Yeah.
The classic example would be stolen generation conditions.
You know a lot about that. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering then, how do you unpack that kind of intergenerational trauma? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're so deeply entrenched.
That is what the person walks in the door with. So I might have a client who walks in who's actually carrying like illnesses, body issues, thoughts, patterns, behaviors, beliefs that they have no story for in this present life. And often I find if I start to dig back, we will find maybe the last generation or a couple of generations ago or even 3 generations ago where something major happened in their family and it's now being expressed in their life, which is brilliant because it means, you can clear it and not pass it on anymore. Because once you work through it in your system, you're not going to pass it on to your children. It can stop with that person. So once again, it's like, that's why you don't need to have a story for what's going on. You don't need to have, we can work with your experience in the world right now, your feelings in the world right now. You might even go, I come from a really loving family and and I've been supported in my education pursuits and I've always had really good jobs, yet I still feel like I'm not good enough. Or I've always had enough money, yet I still feel like I'm terrified that I'm going to lose all my money. Well, does that experience happen in your life? No. Okay. Well, we can work with that. Maybe it happened 3 generations ago. Someone in your family lost so much money and then maybe there was a massive trauma around that. We don't even need to know that, to be honest. We can work right now with the fact that money is your trigger. So let's work with what's happening in your body, in your nervous system, and in your brain when you are getting triggered. Let's start to work with that.
And with just one last question about triggering. With triggering, how do you have any times where it regresses? So let's say you're doing really, really well, but you then suddenly, something big or major comes up, and then that trigger is re-triggered.
That trigger's re-triggered.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not.
What's the example so I can get it?
Let's say, all right, we'll go with something where, we'll go with that, trauma. Perhaps you have been working on trauma from childhood.
Yes.
You think you've kind of got all those memories out of it, and then perhaps maybe on the street you see someone who looks exactly
100%
that person.
Yeah.
And then it all comes flying back.
So if you imagine that trauma I had is like a bucket that exists in me, right? that's full of all the layers of it. And over the course of my lifetime, I will keep working on it.
Yeah.
You know, so there is still, yes, there are still things that trigger me about that. 100% there are. And I often think to myself, you know, is this a lifetime job? And I think it is. I think it is. And I'm actually, you know, it's not okay. Like, it's never actually okay. And so many people have experienced similar traumas, and actually over generations and generations and generations, people have been traumatized by institutions, and it's not okay because they have changed the course of many lives, right? But when you start to unpack it and you start to work with all the elements of it, it's like you're able to live with it in a different way. So I like that. There's aspects of it that are a lot of loss for me because I never got to have the life that I would have had if that hadn't have happened. Right. So there's loss around that. And that will come up at odd times, you know. But when you understand and you've done a lot of nervous system work, you've done a lot of somatic work, so you're able to actually hold space for your emotions. When those triggers come up, I can then be with them and work with them and accept them and go, this is what's happening for me right now. And maybe I need to pull away. Maybe I need to support myself in this way. Maybe I need to go for a big bushwalk and nurture myself. That is so different from being in a situation where it's like you just want to suppress it the whole time. Because when you keep pushing it away, when we try and suppress emotions, when we try and suppress all those things that come up that we don't actually want to deal with, they don't go away. All that happens is your body has to try and hold them down in a different way. So, and then, you know, you can get a whole lot of thoughts around it, you know, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, etc. What we want to do is be able to relate to ourselves in a way that we can go, oh yeah, it's got triggered by something. That's not a big trigger, or that's a really big trigger. How do I support myself now? What emotions coming up for me? How's my body experience this? What's happening in my nervous system? How can I now support myself so that I don't go into complete dysregulated space? I don't have to suppress all my emotions, and I don't go out and start drinking or start overeating or start not eating or start taking it out on someone else in my life or start, you know, speeding in my car or, you know, yelling at my kids or, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because it's got to come out somewhere. Yeah.
And with that suppression, let's say you just finally decide to unsuppress, something that's traumatic in your life. How does your nervous system react to that? Yeah, when it's suddenly gone like, I've got this big secret or this big trauma that it's been burdening me for years, and now suddenly release it to you. How does the nervous system?
So if a client comes
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
We go in very small amounts, tiny amounts. But even to be able to come in and sit down, so I'm also like a counsellor, right? So for them, people to be able to come in and actually finally share something, that in itself is huge. And to be able to be with someone whose nervous system can sit with it and hold that space without getting dysregulated from it, or if any part of it does dysregulate me, I know how to regulate my nervous system to be with this person. That in itself is a huge chunk of the healing, number one, because suddenly it's out in the open. It's in reality. You know, it's like if you've been hiding something in the cupboard for so long, right? And then finally you bring it out, and that it feels so much better to bring it out. It's like, here it is, it's out. And then it's about slowly working with each part of it over time. Clients who come to me who have really big things they want to work through, they find they come and go. Like, and I encourage them to do this. They might come in and do a series of 6 to 12 sessions with me, and then they might stop for a while, and, you know, their life has sort of readjusted itself, and they want to live like that for a little while and take a break for a while, and then they might come back later, you know. And I really encourage that, because it is about, you know, it is about doing it slowly and lovingly and in a way that, you know, we don't have to go and swim in our trauma and stop living and go into it and pick every single bit of flesh off the skeleton of our trauma. We don't have to go and do that. We can do it in a loving way and have breaks and still be involved in our lives. And in fact, you'll really know when you're starting to heal when you are able to go, I'm going to go do something for myself, or I'm going to go and be with a friend that I laugh with, or I'm going to go into this set that I really want to go to. And suddenly we have these aspects of our lives that we feel really happy with as well. We can be, remember, because we can have the joy and we can have the sadness at the same time. We have the anger and we have the fear at the same time. We can have everything goes together. We can have all of it moving together. I think a really good example of like really beautiful ways that our nervous system and our emotions work together is like if you think of a really healthy dog at the dog park, right? So let's take away the ones who have been abused and, you know, who have a lot of trauma from the past. Let's put a whole bunch of healthy dogs at the dog park. They are really great at the way they interact with each other and their nervous systems work, you know. So my dog loves a ball. Like if he had a ball and another dog tried to come and take it, he'd go, he wouldn't actually bite it.
Yeah.
But he was like, don't try and take my ball. That's mine. And he'd take it.
Yeah.
He'd run off. He'd shake his body off. And then he'd back in his joy space chasing his ball. So as humans, the most healthy space for us to be in is when we can actually have those emotions moving through us. Our nervous system can react when it needs to help us to meet whatever is presenting itself to us in our present moment. But then everything can go back to a regulated state afterwards. Most people are walking around their life with everything being dysregulated, and they're just trying as hard as they can to hold everything together as much as they possibly can. You can get to the point where you're like the dog at the dog park who can tell off another person when they try and take your ball, and then you can literally shake it off, never think about it again, and get on with your life and be joyful again.
How do you work with trauma that is similar to your trauma in clients? How do you kind of maintain that, critical reflection? And I'm using the big words, but I know. The critical reflection, and also that kind of holding that space.
Yeah, really, really good question. Through knowing myself.
Yeah.
So I know myself and my nervous system so well. I also have, I get supervision. So supervision is really important because if something comes up for me that I feel like I take something home from that client, then I will go and actually do my own work around that. So I'm continually clearing myself, but also I have peers as well that I can speak to. So colleagues who I can speak to, and I'm never actually sharing something about someone else by my clients. I'm actually sharing my own process around what actually happened. Yeah, in that session. I do find that I can really hold space for people who bring a similar trauma to me. And if I ever feel like, there's an emotional reaction that I'm having that might be mine, I ask them, I'm like, are you feeling this too right now? So I'm feeling really sad about this, and if it's not their sadness, then I'll be like, oh, that's mine. Like I'll name it in the moment with them. Right. So yeah, I've only really in this work, there's only been a couple of times that I've gone home and felt something that's really stuck with me. And in those times, then I've worked through it with my own nervous system, with my own emotions, and through working with a professional who is my supervisor.
How does your practice evolve from where you started to now? Oh, how have you evolved?
I have evolved hugely, and so is my practice, because every human is so unique that everyone that comes in, there is such a level of creativity that I need to use to work out the best way to meet them and where they're at with the tools that I have. So I really love that. But also, I find that, I've been working for a little while in a drug and alcohol rehab, and where there is not a somatic practice. So when I'm working somatically with people, I do use touch as well. There are specific ways you can use touch with people to help them to regulate, to support them, and to help their body to feel supported when they're feeling certain sensations. There are very specific ways to work with people's bodies. And so because I've been working this drug and alcohol program where there is no touch, I've suddenly had to bend my brain to work out how to do that and how to use my skills, but in a way that's not using that. So that's also developed me in a huge way as well. It's like it literally bent my brain to begin with. How are we going to do this? But I continue to evolve. Like I continue to work with different people in different professions. So, for example, I'm currently studying with Dr. Aline Lapierre. She's in America, and she does what's called neuroaffective touch. And she is a psychologist who's also studied in the area of touch and nervous system and emotions and so on. So I will finish up my training with her probably in the next 12 months. So when I finish that, then I'll find someone else that I want to train with next. So I continue to train. I continue to bring new skills into what I'm doing.
How do you work with touch-averse people?
So with touch-averse people?
Yeah.
Oh, so when you want me to touch, then that's fine, I would.
Yeah.
But most people that have come to me, I always ask their permission first. It's always but that's always part of it, but it is part of it. So there are ways of touching someone's body in specific places that actually can help them to process what's going on for them and to also really support them. If you've ever had any kind of touch before, you'll know that. So I'm not going to go into all the complexities of it right now. So it take us another 15 hours.
Yeah.
But even sometimes just placing your hand on someone's heart when they're feeling heartbreak can actually enable their heart to feel connected and supported and loved, and their heart feels safe to release what's going on. So that's a very small example of ways that you can use touch. Touch is always you really want to study touch effectively and properly before you use it, because touching different parts of people's bodies will elicit a different response from their body and will work in different ways. So you need to be educated in not only the nervous system, the emotions, the thoughts, the belief system, etc., what is happening in their body, and then how to effectively use touch to support all those components of them. So their nervous system feels safe, their body feels like it's able to start to release what's going on for it. They feel like they can relax into it. And you can feel the body starts to yield in a certain way, and you can feel it happen. Sometimes I'll be working with someone, say for instance, with gut issues, and there are specific ways to work with the gut, right? And you can feel when the organs start to yield and the organs start to release the traumas that they are holding on to, that are connected to emotional traumas that they're holding, because the organs are connected to emotions. So the organs can be holding those traumas that then influence our health. When you've studied touch and you understand it, you know when the organs start to yield, when they start to let go. So in that scenario, let's say that I'm touching that person in a specific way to work with their gut, and then the organs start to yield, and then will likely have an emotional release. So you see how it's all connected. Yeah.
And so one thing I'd like to know is, when, as I said, you're continuing teaching, you're continuing learning, what were some of the skills or some of the things that you'd like to learn or like to do in the future?
Yeah. Okay, so I've been looking at doing either EMDR or brain spotting.
Yeah.
Right? So they're two that I'm looking at. But that's kind of as far as I've gone so far, because the neuroaffective touch training is so incredible and so intensive, and the final part of that is actually going to either America or the UK and working with her in person. So that's where I'm going next.
Yeah.
That's the next part, the actual in person with her, and then after that, probably brain spotting, I think. That's Yep.
Yeah. All right.
There's a similar sort of thing to EMDR, but it's different.
Yeah.
Because I get so enthusiastic about new tools and new skills to learn, it's one of my things at the moment. I'm trying to manage my enthusiasm around that. So I finish one thing before I actually move on to the next.
Yes. 5
Yes.
unfinished projects.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
I'm doing that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really like it's a level of enthusiasm, right? But then this is all related to being able to work with yourself somatically. It's going, oh, I get really enthusiastic. I know that I can take on too much and then I get overwhelmed with it, right? But there's nothing wrong with being enthusiastic.
Yeah.
It's about like working with yourself so that your enthusiasm doesn't run away with you to the point where it creates stress. And see, the other end of the spectrum could be that I could create too much for myself and get stressed and then shame myself for that and go, I can't cope. But can you see how we strip everything back and come back to what is underneath this, right? What's underneath it? Oh, it's enthusiasm. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But I just need to manage that.
Exactly.
And we're all actually, as humans, like our brains get so complex, but we're actually quite simple. You know, and what we really want and what we really desire is actually quite simple. And so, you know, if I could sum it all up in one thing, it's like I work with people to strip back all the layers of complexity and ways they've learned to see themselves and to shame themselves and to shut themselves down. I'm working on stripping all those layers back so they can come back to being themselves and loving themselves and feeling safe being themselves. And then you can go out and create the life that you actually want to live.
Well, I think it's an absolute beautiful way to end the interview. Liz, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David.